welcome to our second masterclass. I'm really excited for this one. So the goal of today is to, one, hear from four different experts, representing four very distinct and different executive search firms. Really simple way of putting why we think this masterclass is important is at a certain executive level, we're not really going on LinkedIn to put open for work. And yet, we're also trying to connect with executive search and trying to make sure we're on their radar. And so we thought it'd be really helpful to have representatives from different kinds of firms working globally talk to us about what recruitment looks like from their perspective, and ultimately for us to pick up some advice from them on what they would love to see candidates, especially candidates like us, do to really make sure we're maximizing relationships with them. So with that started, I'm going to encourage all of us to use the chat function for questions. This session is being recorded. We're going to record the first 3/4 of the session, and then we're going to go into a closed Q&A session that is not going to be recorded. And so, but let's definitely use the chat function for any questions. And I also, let's see. So actually, let's just jump right into it. It's 6 minutes into the hour. Instead of me reading the bios of our four speakers today, we sent them to you in advance on email. And for those of you who'll be watching this recording later, we'll make sure that the bios are attached and made available to attached to the video and made available. What I wanted to do is actually immediately kick off with self-introductions from the four speakers and asking them to actually speak about their firms and the ways that their firms operate and the spaces within which their firms operate. We'll start with you, Catherine, and ask actually for a bit of a broader overview of executive search before talking to us about your firm.
Great. I'm Catherine Ulrich, and I was asked to talk about the landscape for executive search. You'll find that there are retained executive search firms, contingent search firms, and then also some staffing agencies. And there's a big difference. I think all of us are coming from retained executive search. And what this means is clients hire us to find very specific needs. There are 5 big global executive search firms. They're known as the Shrek, S-H-R-E-K, like the movie. So you have Spencer Stewart, Heidrick & Struggles, Egon Zehnder, Russell Reynolds, and Korn Ferry. Those are the largest companies. My firm is DHR Global in the US. We're the 7th largest. So you'll find that all of us are coming from boutique firms. So as we call it, we're the smallest of the large global firms and the largest of the boutiques here, which makes us a very unique global player. Often the boutiques are very specialized and work closer with the clients and get to know the firms and the space a lot better. You're going to find that executive recruiters work across different industry specializations or functional specializations. So you'll hear that in our introductions. Contingent recruiters, they are often working with, they take what they call job orders. So a recruiter might be working on 40 different searches that are all accounting, all engineering, all whatever their specialty is. And then they want to get to know the people that are in that function. And then they'll just keep sending over resumes that might fit that job, one job order or another. Some of the contingent recruiters and even some of the retained will get to know you and then get you into some of the better firms. As a background, my specialty, I've worked in Silicon Valley now for 25 years in executive search. I'm an electrical engineer, MBA myself, and worked in telecom, strategy consulting, and software product marketing before going into search. I work predominantly for technology companies but I also do technical functions, CIO, chief data officer, chief information security officer types of functions across a lot of different industries with minor, if you will, in academic, medical, and healthcare. So that's my background and a little broader, and I'll turn it over to the other panelists to give you their specialties.
Wonderful. I will just hop straight in, and thank you for laying the ground there, Catherine, in terms of the sector itself, because executive search is a sector, and within where I fall in is, as Catherine said, within a kind of retained search firm. I am a parent labor. We are broadly working in mission-driven sectors. I've really, I grew up in the so-called global South. I don't like the term, but, sometimes it's the best that we have between Africa and Latin America, and then studied leadership and really came at this from the angle of making sure that women from minoritized groups can thrive in their roles. So I work across global foundations, the philanthropic sector, and more broadly, within kind of nonprofits and what touches on that. So I will pass on to the next panelist.
Which is me. Had a difficulty finding my mute button there. But hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Becca Franssen. I'm a partner at executive search firm Gatsenby Sanderson. Like Teresa, Gatsenby Sanderson is a retained search firm, and we work exclusively across the public sector. So Gatsenby has a really established reputation and work in the UK and central government, but has been expanding recently to look into housing, local government, not-for-profits, and most recently education. And that's what my specialism is. So looking at a broad range of leadership appointments in education institutions, everywhere from independent schools and multi-academy trusts to further education, colleges, and university leadership appointments and research institutes. My particular focus is in academia, in higher education academia, looking at Russell Group universities a little bit, but also on modern universities, and then in leadership appointments within those and research institutes. I come from an early academic career myself, so do understand some of the challenges facing early career academics, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get into search, is really focusing on ways that we can sort of facilitate those pathways into academia and support people as they develop their careers. I'll pause there, and I will pass on to the next panelist.
Yeah, I guess I'm next. My name is Christine. I work for SRI Executive Consultant. I'm a senior consultant, and SRI is a leading executive search that is based in Ireland. We do consultancy for non-government organizations, intergovernmental and multilateral banks and agencies. We also do private and philanthropy foundation and universities and research and think tank. So SRI has been in existence for the last 25 years, so we quite boast of a lot of experience. We have a team that ensures that we place our placements that we have made for the last few years around, we do placement of 98.5%. For example, last year we placed with success of 100 retention and 93% of at the director level and above. So we have also, our approach mostly is consulting. We have 3 arms. One is executive search. The second one is leadership. And the third one is strategy. So we are also very sensitive with DAI. We have employees who are from 22 nationalities who speak 32 languages. So we are trying to show how diverse we are here. And these consultants have cultural, they could bring in their different cultural exposure, and of course speaking different languages. So I think that's it for me.
Thank you so much, ladies. And one of the things I'm really excited about is the global breadth that is represented with our panelists here, from Africa, covering Europe, covering North America as well, and also the fact that we actually have tech, all sorts of different sectors, tech, philanthropy, academia, really a diversity of sectors. So I want to thank each one of you for agreeing to spend your time with us. As part of this engagement, every fellow that is interested will be able to have both a CV review and a LinkedIn review by experts from each of the 4 firms that are represented. And Akinyi will be coordinating with her team to match the appropriate for the appropriate reviews by the appropriate folks. So again, we want to thank each of the 4 firms for offering that technical expertise to our sisters here. Let's jump right into the heart of the content, and I want to start with screening criteria. What key qualities or factors do search firms prioritize when you're screening candidates? And I want to start with you, Catherine, and hear also from Becca.
Yeah, so as you can tell, each search is different because our clients are asking us for that. So it starts with the job spec. And in the job spec, you're going to see listing of what the job will entail, but then also requirements for it. The good search people will develop competencies that they're interviewing off of based on what you see in the job spec, check, must have this type of things. It's those competencies that we're interviewing for. What I wanted to talk about also is, as you're going through those screening criteria, often women will look at that list of 10 requirements and say, well, I can't do 5, 6, 7, therefore I'm not going to apply. Well, men, if they only have one of them or they want to do the job, they're going to apply for it. Okay. So just get out there, because you probably have more qualifications than the white male that's sitting next to you who's applying for it. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, women always talk about what they can't do rather than what they can do. And I like talking through parables, if you will, stories. There's this TV show called Brain Games. Okay. So in Brain Games, it's social experiments of how people, work according to a bias. And they send in twins to interview. One twin goes in and says, I had a bad year. I only sold 2 million, but I usually sell 10. The other twin goes in and says, I usually sell 10 million, but I had a bad year and only sold 2. The twin that always gets the job is the one that leads with the good news. I sell 10 million, because people will remember what you bring up first. So if women go in and say, I can't do number 5, 6, that's what they're going to remember, versus I'm really good at 1 and 2. So make sure as you're going in there and interviewing, you're bringing out your strengths and what you can do, not what you can't do. I think, Becca, you had something you wanted to add to this as well.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, Catherine's absolutely right that women do tend to focus on the areas that they don't tick the box. And what we've really been working with at GS is to work with our clients to identify the skills and qualities that actually underpin success in the role, and then go to search for those skills and qualities rather than a tick box list of expectation and experiences. And that helps us look outside of sector for really talented candidates. And so when you're thinking about a job application, don't just look at that sort of list of skills, or that list of experiences that you're meant to bring, but really think about what are the skills that they're getting into. And that's what Catherine was saying about competencies, is really think about, okay, what are they really asking for? If they're talking about accountancy or things like that, are they talking about finance, and how can you demonstrate those areas? So don't just think about that tick box list, but think about your own experience and where you can pull from in terms of demonstrating that. And that doesn't have to come from your job either. It can come from other facets of your life. So whether that's working with a local community group, whether that's some of the NED work that maybe you do, or voluntary work, you don't just have to focus on what you're doing in your substantive role at the moment. That experience, those skills, those qualities can come from lots of different places.
I'm curious if Teresa or Christine, you have anything to add?
Sorry, I was on mute. No, that's okay. Nothing.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's shift to the do's and don'ts question. Would you be able to share the 3 most effective strategies And also 3 critical mistakes you've seen candidates make during the search process. What are strategies you see really working, and what are mistakes that you'd advise us to avoid? And let me start with you, Becca.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ranjuru. And I don't know if I have 3 of each, but I definitely have some key ones that I would like to highlight. And I would say that the first one, and Catherine and I were speaking about this yesterday, is that it really is important that you let your network know that you are open to opportunity. And that's not, as Ranjuru said, sort of putting the open to work on your LinkedIn, but it's really, again, being deliberate about thinking of your network, who are connected to the areas where you want to be considered, who's connected into the roles that you might be thinking about, and how can you sort of leverage some of those connections. And it doesn't have to feel cringy. It doesn't have to feel like you're using these people. It's very much as a, look, I want to be on the radar. These are the types of things that I'm thinking about. Who do you think I should speak to? Is there anyone that you know that is currently looking in these spaces? And what that means is when we are going out to search, we recognize that we cannot map the world. We cannot reach everybody. And so we do have trusted sources that we will reach out to who have held the role that we're currently looking for, or have held senior roles that in similar types of organizations, who will be connected to up and coming talent or people that are off our radar. And we are really explicit with them about what it is that we're looking for, but also, who can you introduce us to? Who's out there that might be looking? So be thoughtful about getting in touch with those people and tell them that they can tell us that you are looking, or that we can get in touch. But also, and this is my second do, please give them permission to share your details directly, because it is quite frustrating that they might say, oh, I know this person's looking, but let me reach out to her first, and then I'll come back to you. Because often they forget, or they get busy and they might not put it on your radar. So please, if they can just tell us directly and we can get in touch directly, that really, really helps all of us out. And then we can follow up and talk to you about the role. I think it's also important that you are responsive. So if a search firm does reach out to you and put something on your radar that actually maybe isn't quite up your alley, do respond. Go back to them and say, actually, this is not the area that I'm looking in, but this is, right? Again, help us help you understand what it is that you're looking for in the areas that might be of interest. And oftentimes we will follow up to say, hey, let's have a conversation. This thing might be coming up in the near future. Let's sit down and see what your skills are, or how that might transfer across. So do be responsive. And also, if there is an organization that you absolutely wouldn't touch with a barge pole, that you do not want to go into, tell us that too, because that does help us understand our market, understand our clients, and feedback. And I have been in situations where clients have said, or candidates have said, no, I won't go there because as a Black woman, I will not be supported. I can then go to the client and say, you are in a dire strait here because this is what's out there in the market about you. And then we can help that organization overcome some of those things and start to think about that. I guess the other thing in terms of, and I think this is directly related, kind of the don't that I think I would highlight, though a single don't that I think I would highlight is don't be passive, right? So if you see something that has piqued your interest, reach out to the search firm, get in touch with them, tell them that this might be of interest. And if it's again not quite aligned, then talk to people about what you might be interested in. Most of us have a facility for what apparently they call lob-ins. At GS we call it's slightly different, but it's about speaking to candidates who might quietly be looking but aren't quite sure. And it's not a coaching conversation. It's kind of a half hour about, okay, what is your expectation? What might you be looking for? What are the areas that interest you? What's your salary expectation? Where's your geography? And then we can start to put on your radar things that align with that. And you will be front of our mind when those things come up. So be proactive, get in touch, and don't be passive.
I have a question for the panelists that came up from that. And that is, on LinkedIn, do you think that, I don't think there's anything wrong that says leave it open to work all the time. Why not? You want to be talking to us. What do you guys think?
I don't see a problem with it. Absolutely. I don't say it doesn't turn me off or on either way. I will still reach out to people I think are interesting, regardless of whether or not it says that. I'm kind of stalkerish that way.
And I think the danger is depending on that, as your kind of visibility. I think some of the tips and tricks that Becca has just outlined there will probably make you stand out a little more than the label on your LinkedIn. Obviously, people, I think we'll talk about confidentiality a little bit later on, but that's always in the back of the mind in terms of sectors that are a bit insular. Do you want to have that out there? I think that's a thought that candidates have brought to the fore.
Okay, and I think also when you keep open, you keep on being disturbed, getting many invitations for jobs. So you keep on being contacted. So if you're ready to keep on replying or maybe ignoring, then that's it. That could be one thing also.
I feel like it makes you look too available. I don't know. I don't know. I'm curious what any of the fellows feel like from the candidate side. I can totally say it's really useful for recruiters, but I'm curious put it in the chat. What do you what are you as a candidate? What's your thought on that? Maybe it's my own personal bias. Catherine, there's a question in chat about corporate and tech sector, that the sector doesn't openly recruit for executive roles, and that recruiters will seek out candidates for roles more than candidates seeking, more often than candidates seeking out those roles. How common is the practice?
Well, in some of the corporations, they've got their own internal talent roles. So their own internal recruiters. So the larger tech companies may not even use executive recruiters like us because they've got their own people internal. And so you'll end up getting, it's usually some pretty junior people that are doing the recruiting and identifying candidates. They do have the internal executive search roles. You know, the real question here, I think, is when you get to the top of the pyramid, there's just not a lot of roles. So there's just not a lot of recruiting. It's not like the staffing when you were earlier in your early career. So you'll only hear about the roles if you're in the know, in the fabric of that role, that role, the recruiter networks, that people know who you are. I think we all know, there are some very well-known names. I'm going to just pick Robin Washington, is a Black woman here in Silicon Valley that sits on a number of public company boards as a CFO. She or Shelley Archambault, who was IBM and then CEO, two Black women here in Silicon Valley. They sit on public company boards. They're probably on every list of getting those board seats because they're known. So that, I think there's a question that comes up later around personal branding. I think it's all about what are you doing so that people know that you're really good at your role, and then you get known to the executive recruiters in this space, to it's also the men in these roles that are doing it, other people sitting in the roles. So if they're getting recruiter calls, they're referring you to them. But I think it comes from people knowing that you're good and knowing what you do so that you get into those conversations. If they don't know you, it's really hard to get you into those conversations, especially if they're not going to a recruiter to open the doors for a wider breadth of candidates.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I love the conversation that's happening in the chat around the awkwardness of putting open to work is actually letting your current employer know that you're looking. And there's also a great answer from Becca on if you're in an organization that supports your development, then they'll support you in moving on up. But we all know that that's not all organizations. So, okay, so I'm going to keep it moving with relationships and initiating relationships. How should senior executives initiate and maintain a productive relationship with a search firm? And let me have Christine kick that off and see Teresa, and then hear from you, Teresa. And I'd love also for us to think about something that Catherine mentioned, which is, how is this different from when we were earlier on in our career? How does engaging with a search process and with executive search, how does that change now that we are more senior? So if you can fold that perspective in at all, that'd be helpful. Christine, tell us about initiating relationships.
So what we do and what we encourage the executives to do is to make sure that they connect with the consultants and the executive search organizations. And what happens is that once you connect, this is shared globally to others, so that whenever there's an opportunity, then you're contacted. So the best thing is use your LinkedIn, utilize it by connecting with the consultants. And then, for example, if as I said, HRI mostly deals with non-government organization and the multilaterals. So what happens is that this is shared. If you're looking for an opportunity non-governmental, then it is shared among the other consultants in globally who are doing who are working on the non-governmental. So it is advisable that your LinkedIn profile also is very attractive in terms of ensure that you've included the keywords, ensure that you have also included the academic experience, pick out the leadership skills, and also just mention if you're looking for something in region, national, global, include all that. Also make sure that most of the times, especially nowadays, people use AI to ensure that their LinkedIn standard.
Looks like we might have lost Christine. Let's switch to you, Teresa, as we try and get Christine back.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I think Christine covered more of the kind of LinkedIn and initiating those relationships with recruiters. I think that the key word there is taking that initiative to initiate, simply because I think a lot of people have in their mind that you should be in touch with a recruiter only when you're looking. But actually, I think I advise most executives to know a good recruiter, to kind of, because we'll have in our sectors the kind of eye onto career trajectories, the getting there steps, and a conversation with a recruiter can always be a really good kind of checkpoint for you as you're growing to the next stage. I think tying into that in terms of stages of career, I'm always surprised by how many women I see as being senior in their role, but maybe they don't see that in themselves. And that I encourage that simply because being aspirational is what I would say to this group. I mean, it goes back to some of what Catherine was mentioning around, I would see more men throw their hat in the ring for that position that's just, a tier above what they think they should be aiming for. But actually, by doing that, you're stretching yourselves. I've seen fantastic, Black women who've come into processes and have come into one process. Maybe that didn't work out, but actually that's really good training ground for that opportunity that will work out. It's also a visibility point because within that you are building networks. And I think that's very often what has helped some men move on to their next phase. And I also think, you reach potentially a certain place in your career where you're bolder in knowing yourself. So I would encourage building honest relationships. So I work on global placements, and sometimes you get candidates who say, well, I'm just going to pass by the recruiter and say, yes, I'm happy with the salary. Yes, I'm happy with the location. But actually, I just want to get to the client organization and swing it from there. Maybe they'll increase the salary, or maybe they'll change their mind on location. I would say be honest, build honest relationships with your recruiter, because I would rather be your advocate. And also that's a kind of bridge building skill that I think, you probably reach that phase where you are more open to being truly who you are and pushing back on certain points. And the last thing that I would say is, be a bridge builder. So that means, be skillful in how you initiate those relationships. I recently came back from a visit to Kigali, and I had a candidate invite me to a donor pitch that she was giving, and then a dinner with some of her immediate team members. Now, it might seem like, oh, well, if I invite a recruiter, will they know that I'm kind of thinking? But actually, it was a really good opportunity to connect with sector themes, and that's made her stand out. And so I think thinking about creative ways that you can bring, networks and executive search in. Christine, I'm so sorry we lost you.
Sorry, my power went off the wrong time. Yeah.
So we had switched to Teresa, but you had some really good points. So let's come back to your points.
So I was I was talking about AI. I think that's why I stopped.
Yes.
I was saying that I was looking at optimizing profiles. So where nowadays people use AI to ensure that their LinkedIn profiles stand out. But sometimes it's good to have that, that honest, and you prepare your profile properly so that people are able to pick. There's that human touch. When you prepare your profile, it's easy to, when you read it, you are able to tell exactly even the emotions of that person. And so the language that, of course, is used, nowadays, there are other technology that are able to detect that you've used maybe something like GPT. Yeah, so it's always good to ensure that their keywords are available. That way we are able to easily locate you and find out that your profile is okay. Then we are also able to check your academic experience. Sometimes people leave out the academic experience, and for the jobs, probably where there's a job description that requires master's, PhD, that should be available. And then the leadership, I talked about the leadership. How long have you been a leader? That is also necessary for that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, Teresa. Catherine,
Yeah.
Becca, anything to add?
I've got something. When I joined Russell Reynolds and entered executive search, I saw one of my engineering classmates, a woman, was getting called on every VP engineering search. And I didn't think I was up to VP level yet. I was almost up to that. So I looked back to see, well, what was she doing? And I realized every single search we were calling her on, because she would say, either raise her hand and say, I'm interested in this, or if not, she would give us 3 names of other people to call. And so every single search, she got called first because she would be giving names. I looked at my record and it said, well, and I was getting recruiter calls and I didn't return them all because I only returned the ones that were of interest. And if I didn't, like if I wasn't interested, I wasn't giving them names. So my record said not helpful. So I deleted that entry because I didn't know how to use executive recruiters. But you can't go back and delete that not helpful comment like I did. So how do you become the woman that is always giving names so that she gets called? So then she had a choice because she was getting the calls on them.
Fantastic. Becca, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing for me. That sums it up really well.
Awesome. I see a really active conversation happening in the chat. And some of the answers I think are in some of the questions that are coming up. So let's quickly shift to optimizing profiles. How can senior executives optimize their online presence and profiles, like on LinkedIn, to be more attractive and noticeable to the search firms? And I want to start with you, Christine, and then come to you, Catherine.
Yeah, so I mentioned about keywords. Make sure that the profile is very clear on what you're looking for. If you're looking for, say, a job with the NGO, make sure that you pick what the NGO requires, donor experience and all that. If you're looking for IT, then make sure that, or technology, make sure that stands out so that the executive recruiter is able to pick that out. And I also talked about, of course, if there's a job that you've spotted and you need to look at match your skills with the job that you're interested in. So that should also be very clear in your LinkedIn profile. And then, of course, sometimes you'll find that recruiters are looking for certain languages, probably English speaking, Spanish speaking. So make sure that you include such in your LinkedIn profile. And then, of course, the experience. The experience is very key. You could start with the current experience, going down to the last experience, because that helps the recruiter to check on the kind of experience. If probably we're looking for someone, a director, maybe in communications, and you've done communication previously, but you're doing something different, then that helps the recruiter to be able to check and see, oh, this person has experience in communications, even if they are doing something totally different. So it is very important for you to list down the experience. and also the leadership qualities and experience. I guess that's what I can say for that. I talked about AI, and that's also part of it. So ensure that there's that human touch in your LinkedIn profile. It's very interesting to read when you see someone is really explaining, and you can actually feel the person as you read the profile, rather than use AI. It's a competition, but it works for some and maybe not for all.
That's really interesting perspective, Christine. Catherine.
I think Christine nailed everything we're looking for in those LinkedIn profiles. What I'd highlight from that is, your headline sets you off right away about your personal brand. What is it that who you are and what you do really well and what you're looking for. The other thing that Christine brought up is, if you heard from her, it's what the company's looking for, what the hiring company's looking for. I often say that, the resume, because LinkedIn is really a resume, a version of that, should be called resume because it has me in it. But if you think about it, it should be a them, because it's what are they looking for and what's important to them. And so if you use that perspective in putting together your profile, it's exactly what Christine said. We're looking for the keywords for that job, for them and what they're hiring for. And so you need to make sure you've got those across there. So start with the headline. I'd say highlight your accomplishments. I recommend that you do it in bite-size, little tiny paragraphs, maybe a sentence or two on each of the jobs, not your entire resume. You want us to come to you to ask for your resume, because we can create a resume off of your LinkedIn profile if you've got everything there. So make it just bite size. But I think it's all about that, personal branding that gets you attracted to them.
I think just one thing that I would add to that is, I think a lot of people focus on their current job, and especially if you're looking to take a step up, think about what you're doing outside of your job. So think about how you're pushing the boundaries of your current role and how you're demonstrating some of those qualities or those skills or that experience that will help you get to the next stage. So sometimes a role can be really straightforward, and you kind of look at it and we think, okay, well, they're doing that, that's fine. But if you then have something in your LinkedIn profile or your CV that says, and then I did this, or this is something I took on in addition to that, and that might be NED work, it might be volunteer, it might be other projects or things, and how you're collaborating across your organization, those are the things that are also going to stand out, because you're not just limiting yourself to what your role says you can do. You're finding opportunities to push beyond that and to demonstrate that you're ready to take that step.
Catherine, thank you, Becca. Catherine, there's a question in chat about network. And in our prep call, you had a really strong perspective on this that I'd love for you to share about opening your network and leveraging your network. There's a question about how much labor it is. It almost, and someone saying it felt like a job responding to those recruiter calls and sharing the 3 names.
I'm going to change your perspective on that. There is studies have shown the broader your network is, the more successful your career will be. And it comes from being able to take ideas from one part of your network and share with others. And so if you think about your career, you should be developing your network. What you're going to find is some people are more influential and more important than others. So you might want to limit your time. There's a book that I like. I'll put it in the chat later on. It's called The Key, Key, by Ken Tudhope, Tudhope. It's about developing your network, and it takes somebody right out of school and how they start to develop and then nurture that network over time. And you get to the stage where, some of us are later in our careers. My network is so rich, and I love the richness of that. And mine is a women's network, which is just fabulous because I have fun with my women's network all day long. But I think that's, I think that you should be spending time on developing your network, not just, the skill sets that you need for the job, but developing a network is one of those, should be part of that career development path. Oh, there's
Fantastic.
one other thing that I did bring up yesterday. Men. Okay, so here's how men do it. Oh, let me just introduce you to my friend. And they do that all the time. And even if they've not asked if we should introduce them, they're always introducing their network. Women don't do that. We say, well, let me check with my friend. But men are introducing other men to do business with them. Women don't do that. So one of the things I encourage you is when you get into companies, remember that this group of executive recruiters here, we all think women and diverse women first instead of some of the other recruiters. So when you get into companies, introduce these recruiters, introduce these women that are part of the B-WEL program. Women don't do that. And I think that, here we all are, I'm part of a lot of women's organizations in Silicon Valley and across the globe, actually. And if we all got better at introducing one of us into opportunities, women are going to rule the world if we can learn that skill set.
I'm listening to you and I'm challenging myself. And let me challenge each one of you. When is the last time you introduced another woman to opportunity, and how often are you doing it? And can we, each as an individual, just set up a target? Every month, I'm going to introduce 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 women to opportunities. That could be a really interesting way to grow our own network. Also, let's keep it moving with a question about confidentiality. What should executives expect from the search process, and how do search firms ensure confidentiality? And let's come to you, Becca.
Great, thanks, Manjuru. And I would say, and I actually wrote this in the chat just a little bit ago, confidentiality is really important to us because we are often speaking to people who are not actively looking for roles. And so we are concerned about putting them in jeopardy with their current employer or creating a difficult environment for them. So I would say that confidentiality is exceptionally important to us. I think academics are particularly bad for this. Well, they'll say, well, I'll give you a CV, but you can't show anybody. And then I think, well, that actually doesn't help me because I need to share it with somebody, right? Like somebody needs to look at it. And so we do ask the panel not to discuss the search outside of the confines of the deliberation room. If we have external stakeholders come in for various points of the process, we actually have got them to sign NDAs. So they can't share any information of who has applied. Typically later on in the process, we will ask if we can start reaching out to referees. So you will want to always have a reference or a referee in mind that we can contact. And that might be a former employer. It might be someone that you currently work alongside. If you are the preferred candidate, of course, we will need to then do extensive referencing. So you will need to let your employer know, and then we will start that process. But I would say confidentiality is sort of cascade. So at the beginning, it's quite confidential, and then it becomes less confidential as you move through the process. In university president appointments that we've worked on, I mean, it can get quite ridiculous where we actually have to schedule people moving around the campus so that they don't cross paths and they don't see each other. And then sometimes, it'll be the sign-in sheet that they've had to sign for COVID that they'll see each other's names. We've worked through that, but we do take confidentiality quite seriously. A thing that I will end on, though, and we discussed this yesterday, is that as we go through the process again, confidentiality does become limited, and we are starting to get a lot of requests for enhanced due diligence when we are looking at candidates. And so we will often be asked to reach into your social media presence to understand what has been said about you or what you are saying out there. So do keep that in mind. Gatsenby Sanderson, now as standard across all processes, actually does do a deep dive into that. So we will ask for your personal email addresses so that we can then find your social media, and then we will check your social media history for anything that you have said, perhaps controversial. In government, which Gatsenby Sanderson is known for, that is obviously a very big element. President, university, vice chancellor, president searches as well. So just do be cognizant of that it's not quite confidentiality, but due diligence is becoming much more enhanced. That risk of embarrassment to the client organization, they're trying to mitigate that. So just bear that in mind in terms of your social media presence.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time and that we still have about 3 more questions to go. I'm gonna move this along and come to you, Teresa, for a question on staying top of mind. How can senior executives remain top of mind for relevant opportunities? And how often should they update search firms about their career aspirations? How often do you want me bugging you about, hey, I'm still out here? Teresa.
Well, first of all, it's great to know that that's a question out there. I think it's important, I think, to know that search firms are open to conversations with you as you grow and aspire in your career. I think we talked about a little bit about online engagement, kind of being present, and really, I think I would say communication is not the number of emails I get from you. It's about, the kind of quality of that information. So, are you making shifts in the sector? As Becca mentioned, that, your role is, yes, your executive role, but are you leading interesting initiatives, or, have you moved on to boards and things like those? Those are great things to update us on, simply because, as I said, you are a bridge to the sector. So being able to listen to you and hear your shifts as well is a kind of reciprocal relationship and a kind of backwards way to stay on top of the mind of recruiters. I think what you can also do is think about your personal brand. And I've seen this done well, and I've seen this done less well. It's less about pushing forward your objective. It's more about communicating well what you think you bring. And where I've seen it done well is when people think about, think through your network. It's okay to get together a kind of small advisory for yourself, people that you can communicate what you do to, that will prepare you for future interviews, but it'll also be a kind of reflection point. We don't often get that time to pull back and think, well, what is it exactly that I've been able to build in my own career? And what is it that I'm aspiring to? Because I think communicating that well when you do have that time with a recruiter is a good way to get around that. And then finally, just post COVID, I think probably COVID made us comfortable with the online meets, but I think nothing beats an in-person conversation. So where you have that opportunity to have an in-person coffee, it's those non-tangible bits where you get to know each other as people that leave that extra memory.
It's really interesting. I'm hearing the people element coming from you, Teresa, right now. Christine has really been emphasizing it. And maybe it's just me, but I find it heartening. Okay. We have one more. Okay.
I have two quick tips to add to that. I was reflecting on what you said, and one of the tips, the introductions that I get like a dozen people introducing themselves a day. I can't keep up with that. But if someone says, oh, your client or this person introduced me, I have to take those calls as a courtesy to that client. So as you're doing your networking, ask someone, who's the best recruiter in this space? And when they give you, oh, we've used this person, is it okay if I reach out to them, or can you introduce me to them? Because I have to take that as a courtesy to my client. The second tip is during one of the economic downturns, somebody was sending emails like monthly, during a whole year. And usually that bothers me, except this guy was saying, I was just talking to this company and they're looking for a chief marketing officer and they're not using a recruiter. And so he was giving me leads in the market. That was another one that I gladly read his email on a monthly basis. So 2 tips if you're not getting traction with recruiters.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm going to try and squeeze this one in. I hope we can do it relatively fast. Emerging trends and international opportunities. What are the emerging trends in executive placement that you're seeing, and how do you see such firms approaching international placements in the unique challenges they present? And earlier we had talked in a prep call about remote work. And I see a question and a conversation about that. So if you could also tie what's happening with remote roles. Let me start with you, Teresa, then come to Catherine and see if Becca and Christine have anything to add.
Sure, and happy to try and answer this one much more quickly. I think what we've seen is in search as an industry, search firms are becoming more international. So opening up offices in different parts of the world, which means that we are more responsive as a sector to different markets, and it makes us smarter when advocating for candidates coming from different parts of the world. I think certainly in our sector, and I'm speaking about the kind of social impact sector, we've seen an opening up of global locations, because I think COVID showed us the ability to work in different places. So whereas organizations usually used to say, for that type of senior level position that's on the senior leadership team, which I would imagine this audience is talking about, people need to be based where the headquarters is. There's more of a kind of split location openness. Obviously be pragmatic about that, ask the necessary questions, because you don't want to be stuck in a situation where something doesn't work with your own life. And work-life balance is, of course, an important topic. So in general, I think we are seeing that kind of globalizing. We are seeing search firms consider more, as they become more global, different salary benchmarks as well, practicalities that are helping that globalization.
And I'll add, I was just in Germany meeting with our partners in one of our practice areas and partners across Europe. And so there are partners in the different markets you're going to. I'll answer this question for people who are interested in working in the US. You need to have, the question we're allowed to ask legally is, can you work permanently in the US? If you don't have visa sponsorship, it is very difficult to work in some of the areas. You'll have to do the work on visas yourself. Maybe you qualify for an expert visa, which is a lot easier than the US's H-1B visa process. So you'll need to understand that if you're looking to work in the US. Regarding one of the questions that we got brought up is what's emerging trend of, are Black women and, Black people, is there backlash, or are people still looking for that? I think all of us agree that diversity is still important and our clients are asking for it. In the US, we're always looking to make sure that we have a diverse slate, and I love getting connected to all of you, that if we can get you introduced into clients. The last question on remote versus hybrid. There are some companies deciding that we have a remote culture. We're all going to be remote. Other companies are saying, well, if the position doesn't require you to be in person for certain job classifications, different job functions, you can be remote. Others are saying, well, we've got hybrid. You have to be in the office 3 days a week. As you get more senior in your career, hybrid doesn't look like hybrid 3 days in a week. You need to be in the office. And so as I put it, it's no longer hybrid. It's what we used to have. You have to be full-time in the office, but people are a lot more flexible about if you need a Friday off, or you've got a doctor's appointment, or a kid has an activity. So you need to look at the culture of the firm to decide, what is that culture? Remote for some, or do I need to be in the office?
Thank you. I'm actually going to just very quickly, because we are out of time, I want to come very quickly to each of you with kind of almost your closing thoughts on this. But in what ways can and is the executive search industry already working to address issues of bias? B-WEL, this conversation is really focused on Black women, humans who are navigating that intersection of anti-Black racism and patriarchy. In what ways are you seeing your sector stepping up to address issues of bias? And I will start with you, Christine, then go to Becca, then go to Teresa, then Catherine. And use that also to wrap up kind of your big thoughts.
Yes, so what we do is we make sure that our assessment process is equitable. We ensure that the process, of course, the candidates, we look at also the unique perspective of every candidate and experience. So the assessment process is very important so that there's no bias. We just look at the candidate and see where they meet exactly what we are looking for. We will have a candidates fill same documents, then we, with different questions, then we look at the questions and see whether they answered according to the way the job reflects, the job that is advertised. So assessment process is very important.
Alrighty, thank you.
I would say that from our end, it's perhaps a bit more focused on engagement with the client organization. And at GS, we are really focusing on challenging our client organization. When they ask us to bring them a diverse field, it's really about asking them why do they want that, and what are they doing to support diversity within their organization. And I just noted this in the chat function as well. If they can't answer that question, then we have a deeper issue that we need to unpick and work through, because the point of diversity is to create a more resilient organization, to bring in different perspectives so that they can change institutional thinking. And if they haven't got to that point yet, then they're not actually ready for diversity, and they're setting people up to fail. And so we're really focused on that part of the search. I think the other thing that we do, and this goes back to my comment on, reaching out to sources and making sure that you're on that source radar, that you've expanded to your network, is we challenge our sources to think outside of the box, to not just recommend more white men, for example, if we're speaking to white men, but to really think about people from underrepresented groups and who can we contact. So again, do use your networks to best effect so that we can reach you, and that you become on our radar, because we are really challenging them to help us think differently about the skill sets that we're looking for.
Yeah. Thank you. Teresa?
Great. I think so. In terms of what we are doing, I was just looking at the shape of the executive search industry recently, and I think it's something like 88% of the executives, kind of represent a white male demography. So we are actually thinking about changing the representation in the sector itself, changing our internal teams. I think bringing people on with lived experience really helps in terms of, candidates seeing people who look like them sometimes might be helpful and actually open up, different aspects and ways of communicating with executive search firms. We are also working, obviously, on making panels themselves more representative. So actually taking that bolder approach when we don't see that representation at the panel level. Just asking organizations about how they can equalize that. If it's not immediately, maybe it's a journey, but we want to make sure that we are part of that journey. And then obviously also a personal interest of mine is working on coaching candidates from minoritized groups, because we have a perspective, having worked with so many different panels. We've actually just recently formulated a board training program for kind of up and coming board members. To review again and have a safe space where you can talk about things like imposter syndrome, which appears at levels that you wouldn't expect it to appear, but to make sure that the firm is curating, the future talents. So that's all I'll add.
And
awesome.
Then to wrap up, I'll just say Christine said it best with the bias and asking questions about the competencies, as I mentioned earlier. So if you interview around those competencies, it reduces the chance of bias. So one of the things we do is build that into the interview process. So as you're at companies, you should be looking for others doing the same thing and asking around the competencies and making sure there is a diverse panel that is doing the interviewing.
Fantastic. A diverse panel doing the interviewing is a really good screen. At this point, we're going to come to a close of this engagement.